Penn State is looking for a new head coach, and could Fran Brown be a possibility? Let's talk about it.
You are Locked On Syracuse, your daily podcast on the Syracuse Orange, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, everyone, and welcome into this Locked On crossover edition. Locked On Syracuse, I'm Jackson Holzer. Of course, that's Zach Seyko, the host of Locked On Penn State Nittany Lions. And on today's show, of course, we are talking about the ripple effects of Penn State firing their head coach, James Franklin, over the weekend. We'll dive into it all, the recruiting aspect of it, the top candidates to replace James Franklin as head coach, and also whether or not Fran Brown, the head coach of Syracuse right now, is a possibility for Penn State. All that and more here on today's crossover edition of Locked On Syracuse and Locked On Nittany Lions. And before we get into everything, this episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code Locked On College for $20 off your first purchase. So, Zach, last time we did a crossover podcast together, it was in the wake of everything that happened with Trevor Pena.
I know.
And if you evaluate these two teams' seasons so far, it looks like, well, aside from Trevor Pena's bank account, everyone seems to have lost because Penn State, good start to the year, national championship hopes. Obviously, now they have fired their head coach after 3 straight losses. And with Syracuse, well, they were looking pretty good. And then their starting quarterback got a torn Achilles, and the season has gone essentially in the toilet from there. We'll see if they can bounce back this weekend. But regardless, Penn State, they fire head coach James Franklin. So in your opinion, who do you think are the top candidates to replace Franklin as head coach?
Ironic, isn't it? You know, talking about Trevor Pena and everything. And then who would have thought? I don't think anybody would have predicted that Penn State and Syracuse have the same record to this point. So Jackson, it's great to talk to you again. As far as head coaching candidates go, I'm here to say that, yes, Fran Brown is a legitimate candidate. Not saying that he's the favorite, not saying he's a long shot either. Fran Brown to Penn State makes a ton of sense for both parties. Fran Brown gets a raise, gets a little more establishment there. Penn State's a better job and a better program than Syracuse, objectively speaking. I'm not trying to take jabs at Syracuse, but it just, there's more resources for Fran Brown to work with, but he's not, as I said, he's not going to be the favorite. As far as candidates that Penn State has a preference towards first, it's going to be familiarity. It's going to start with the likes of Manny Diaz. Penn State's going to reach out to Matt Rhule. There's a ton of connections, not only just, he played under Paterno. He's from Central Pennsylvania. He's from State College. Okay. So right there, it's an amazing fit, right? He's also good friends with Pat Kraft, the athletic director. Pat Kraft and Matt Rhule work together at Temple. So they have a working relationship, a working prior friendship, whereas Pat Kraft and James Franklin, sure, they say that they were both friends, but they didn't have any previous time together where they both succeeded to the likes together, right? There's not a lot of expectations at Temple, and Matt Rhule and Pat Kraft did pretty well together in a partnership. So those are the first ones that will come to mind. Curt Cignetti has Pennsylvania connections. He's from Western Pennsylvania. You can see the kind of success that he's had in one season and then following it up the next year. So that's why Penn State is doing this, because they see Indiana of all teams, have a complete turnaround with the right coach, that they can become a national powerhouse. That's the thing. Penn State, not only were they not viewed as a national powerhouse, they weren't either. So it wasn't a difference. It wasn't a difference of opinion. And when you see a school like Indiana do it with Curt Cignetti, you see, I didn't mention Mike Elko because Texas A&M is going to protect Elko at all costs, but I think that is my top candidate personally. You wanted me to say that Penn State hit a home run hire and there's nobody else they could have done better with. It is Mike Elko with the Pennsylvania and New Jersey connection, something that Fran Brown has. So you see what they do at Texas A&M, at Indiana, at Oregon with Dan Lanning. Penn State's sitting here, and I think they realized we can do better. We should be doing better. Why are we losing to? It's one thing to lose to Oregon. It's another to lose to Northwestern and UCLA. So that is why we are here today, Jackson.
I hit on it yesterday when discussing on Locked On Syracuse briefly about the thoughts originally, because it's such a big story, Penn State firing James Franklin. I mean, he gets there, the program's in turmoil, completely turns it around. They're a very, very good established program for a long time when he's there, but he had this well-earned reputation of not being able to win the big game. And what I essentially said on there was that two things can be true in regards to James Franklin. I think the program that ultimately hires James Franklin, because he's definitely going to get another job, is going to be excited and that they're going to be happy because ultimately James Franklin is a really good head coach. Yeah. He may not be elite. He hasn't necessarily got there yet, but he is really good. And there are examples of coaches who have that reputation of not being able to win the big game, all of a sudden win the big game. And we were talking off air about Andy Reid when he was with the Philadelphia Eagles. He didn't really win the big game there, gets to Kansas City, gets Patrick Mahomes. Now he's regarded as one of the greatest head coaches of all time. So that's just one example for you right there. But the other thing that's true is that it was time for Penn State. It was time. Too many times they had just fallen short. And what do you have to lose? Sure, you might be a 6-6 program. Well, it's not like they're coming off a national championship, which is ultimately what matters with a program like Penn State. And if you hire a head coach and it just doesn't work out, then in 3 years, he'll be looking for another one. And maybe that head coach can do better because Penn State has a lot of resources to work with. So what are your personal thoughts about Fran Brown? I'm very curious.
Yeah, well, a lot of things, I want to respond to the fact of both parties there. Andy Reid benefited from getting fired by Philadelphia, winning multiple Super Bowls. But let's pretend that Philadelphia is the theoretical place of Penn State. Philadelphia won a couple of Super Bowls too. It took some time, but actually both parties benefited from the split. So James Franklin could succeed somewhere else. And I'm not rooting against him. I don't pray on his downfall or anything. I hope that he lands at an institution that gives him the resources that he needs, the support that he needs, where he doesn't feel like the fan base is against him. And the fan base did turn against him at Penn State. It's very devastating. It's very sad to watch unfold because I don't think James Franklin is a bad person at all. And I've never said that or tried to imply it. But you also have to, Jackson, you take the nuanced approach to this from somebody that's not right in covering Penn State about this, is that it was time for a split. The relationship had run its course. James Franklin said, I need more. I need more. I need more. You got maxed out. And this is the result that you were going to get. You were just always going to lose to the team that was better than you, whether it was Ohio State, Michigan, Notre Dame, or probably the most insulting is Oregon. Because Oregon hires Dan Lanning. They see an immediate turnaround after, again, Mario Cristobal's kind of in the James Franklin tier where he's good, but he's not great at their respective institutions, right? And then Dan Lanning and Oregon are in the Big Ten for one season, and they immediately leapfrog Penn State. So that's why you're seeing this happen. So now we're going to talk about Fran Brown so much and why he's a great coach. In Syracuse, Syracuse has a great coach. I've said before that Fran Brown going to Syracuse was bad news for Penn State. It's not the end of the world, but you're not going to win as many recruiting battles as you would like in the regional parts of the country in New Jersey, New York, and hey, maybe even Pennsylvania, because Fran Brown is that much of a phenomenal recruiter, even though James Franklin and his staff were. So I like Fran Brown because I think he can succeed just about anywhere because he's no nonsense. He's tough. He's gritty. It's what Penn State's looking for. And he just knows how to recruit. It's the reason Syracuse took a chance on him as just an assistant coach at Georgia. He wasn't a coordinator. He wasn't necessarily a rising star, a program builder, but they knew. They said, we know that he's got something special here. So Penn State, they're probably sitting here thinking, hey, if Fran Brown can succeed at a place like Syracuse, what about with the backing of Penn State?
Great point there, Zach. And coming up, we'll continue to talk about Fran Brown and the possibility of Penn State at least inquiring about him being their next head coach. So stick with us here on this Locked On crossover edition of Locked On Syracuse and Locked On Nittany Lions. The holidays are going to be here before you know it, which is exciting, but getting your home ready for guests and celebrations can feel like a lot. Maybe your serveware needs a refresh, or the guest room could use new bedding. Wayfair has everything you need to get your home holiday ready, from Christmas trees and bedding, cookware, outdoor inflatables. It's your one-stop shop for every room in the house. And Wayfair makes it easy to personalize your home for the holidays with a huge selection for every style and budget. And with free and easy delivery, even on the big stuff, you can get everything you need without the hassle of huge delivery fees. Now, instead of stressing about getting the house ready, you can actually enjoy the holidays with friends and family. Get organized, refreshed, and ready for the holidays for way less. Head to wayfair.com right now to shop all things home. That's WAYFAIR.com. Wayfair, every style, every home. The NFL season is here, and FanDuel has an offer that you definitely don't want to miss. Right now, new customers can bet just $5 and get $300 in bonus bets if you win. That's right. Pick a bet, put down $5, and if it hits, you'll unlock $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. It makes watching football even more exciting when you've got a little something riding on the action, right? Whether you're a casual fan or you love diving into the stats, FanDuel makes the game day experience so much better. So what are you waiting for? I mean, you can place a bet for $5 and put it on the Carolina Panthers because they should beat the New York Jets this weekend. And hey, if they do that, you'll get $300 in bonus bets. Just visit FanDuel.com to download the FanDuel app today and get started. Locked on Syracuse, locked on Nittany Lions. I'm Jackson Holzer. Of course, that is Zach Seyko of Locked on Nittany Lions. We continue to talk about Penn State and their search for a new head coach. Zach already hit on some potential candidates. I think from an outside perspective, Zach, Penn State is going to go after some big fish.
Oh, yeah.
So you already hit on some of them. I mean, Curt Cignetti is a big one. Matt Rhule is a big one. You touched on the guy from Texas A&M as well. It's one of those jobs. It's one of those situations where I think Penn State is going to do their due diligence on practically anyone you can think of in the country. So the idea, and I'm mainly talking to Syracuse fans right now, the idea of Fran Brown being a possibility, honestly, I would take that as a compliment. I don't think ultimately he's going to end up with Penn State because they are going to go big game hunting, but I think it's a compliment, and ultimately it shows you how Fran Brown is ultimately doing a really good job with Syracuse, because if he wasn't doing a really good job with Syracuse, I don't think Penn State would even consider doing their homework on a guy like Fran Brown. But that's just my thoughts about Fran Brown and Penn State. And Zach, you've already hit on your thoughts about Fran Brown and Penn State. You do like Fran Brown. You do think he could succeed there. But you put out a feeler tweet, I think it was a couple of days ago, about how would you feel, Penn State fan base, if Fran Brown was the head coach, that is who they decided to choose. What was the fan base's general reaction to that?
It seemed like a resounding no, not collectively, but the people that were saying this is a hard no. And then you would get, a lot of likes on that, or just a lot of interaction with that post. So I'm going to take this as, and it's the same thing how Penn State sees this too. And as you do, Fran Brown is not the first choice for Penn State, but he is a possibility. I would say, again, there's that first group of Mike Elko. I didn't even mention Eli Drinkwitz because he's already been, this is on the record, he's already been contacted by Penn State. Apparently Marcus Freeman on 3 is reporting that Penn State and Marcus Freeman have been in contact with one another. Whether Marcus Freeman is actually entertaining it, there is no stone that Penn State is not going to turn over here to find the right head coach, meaning that, yeah, Urban Meyer, Nick Saban, anybody. It truly is anybody and everybody, but eliminate the possibilities where, no, Ryan Day would not leave Ohio State. Dan Lanning would not leave Oregon. Marcus Freeman would not leave Notre Dame unless it's for Ohio State. But what about Eli Drinkwitz? What about Mike Elko? What about Manny Diaz coming back to State College? There are a lot of realistic possibilities that, okay, well, we don't think it's likely. Okay, but eliminate the impossible choices of the 3 that I named, and then everybody else seems to be fair game. So because of that, while Fran Brown is still a rising star in the coaching world, because I named about 4 or 5 other names that Penn State's still going to have a preference for first, because they just have more proven experience. They've led a Big Ten. They're looking for somebody that's had success or the Big Ten or the SEC level. While I like Fran Brown as a candidate a ton, I think he's a phenomenal recruiter. Give him a bigger war chest and he will absolutely dominate. At the end of the day, though, we still don't know how he's going to handle a Big Ten or an SEC powerhouse program. I mean, Penn State's a top 10 job. So how would Brown do in that situation? We don't know. And I don't think Penn State, you don't pay James Franklin $50 million to go take a chance on a what if, to an extent, even though I've said, hey, a Will Stein, I think would be a really good candidate, but it sounds like Penn State, even with the buyout, is not hurting for money. So Mike Elko, my personal top choice, but even Urban Meyer becomes a little more realistic for them. Even a Nick Saban, long shots, but don't count them out.
I hit on it also yesterday when discussing Fran Brown, and we are, I think, in agreement with it. I think that Fran Brown, once you eliminate the impossible category, he is, I think, a second tier option for Penn State, where they somehow strike out on all their top tier guys. And then you look at the second tier and you do need a head coach for next season. It's not like you can go coachless. And in that case, I would start to worry about really the possibility of Fran Brown and Penn State, because you look at Fran Brown's resume, and I do think it's very impressive. I do think it's a resume where there are a lot of schools in the country that would want Fran Brown, but I think that those schools are not necessarily on a level where it would make much sense to leave Syracuse to join X program. Like, it would almost be maybe a slight bump up, but not enough to where it's almost like a lateral move. Going to Penn State is definitely not a lateral move for Fran Brown if he were to get that job opportunity. You look at what he's done so far at Syracuse. He's obviously completely changed the game as far as recruiting. Zach, you already hit on it in the first segment, how he's competing with Penn State now and how Penn State typically wins because they're Penn State and they got more resources. Fran Brown is not making it easier on Penn State with recruiting. And we're seeing that, and we'll touch on this in a second, with the impact of recruiting here with the James Franklin firing, and how Fran Brown, he's certainly taking advantage with getting.
Oh, he's going to capitalize on it.
Oh, he's getting some of these guys on campus already. Khalil Taylor, Keemon Spell, they're coming on campus now. Yeah. They were previously committed to Penn State. So you know that Fran Brown, he's a rising star, and he goes 10-3 in his first year. And I do think there's an alternate universe, if Steve Angeli had stayed healthy, that he might be a tier 1 candidate for Penn State, because if Syracuse, I think we're 5-1 right now, Zach, you'd be on here saying I would want Fran Brown as a tier 1 option. But the reality is of what's happened, and it's not necessarily Fran's fault, is that his quarterback tore his Achilles in the Clemson game.
Yes. And
his backup quarterback in Ricky Collins is not making him look like a good head coach right now. That's for sure, because the team is now losing games. It doesn't look like, when you look at their second half of the schedule, based on how they've looked with Ricky Collins, that they're going to make a bowl. And so I'm sitting here saying, you just fire James Franklin, and now you're going to hire a coach who did not make a bowl in his second season at Syracuse. It's no disrespect to Fran Brown, because we understand the circumstances, but this is a Penn State job. You're not taking a chance like that. I just don't see a world where that happens unless they strike out on everyone.
Penn State, I mean, when they hired James Franklin 12 years ago, it was, I mean, he had SEC experience. So, and when I say SEC experience, I mean leading a program and proven. I mean, he was 9-3 at Vanderbilt for 3 consecutive seasons, or maybe he was 8-4 in that one season. Anyway, he still racked up about 26, 27 victories at Vanderbilt at the time when college football was a lot different. Okay. So that's what Penn State is looking for. Being 500 in the ACC. Now, I know there's some nuance here, right? I'm not dismissing anything that, oh, well, Fran Brown, has lost control of his team or still can't. I mean, that Clemson victory, right? Going on the road when your team is fairly healthy and winning the way that they did is impressive. And Penn State's not naive enough to look past it and say, like, well, he lost a couple of other games that he shouldn't have. That's not going to define Fran Brown as a head coach there. But it's really about, what have you proven to this point? He hasn't been a coordinator. He hasn't led a Big Ten or an SEC program. Again, Penn State is promising national championships. That's what they put their stake in the ground, and they said, we are chasing national championships. You can guarantee that. I don't know that that's Fran Brown right now. in 5 to 10 years. I think that's the trajectory he's on. So, but that's the idea, is that you take a chance on him right now to get to that point and get situated. But I think Penn State is just looking, since they made that kind of promise, you have to go get somebody that can still improve, but is already at close to that level right now. I don't know that Fran Brown is close, but I think he can get there in due time.
I think so as well, especially if Syracuse can give him some more resources, improve that defense, and maybe we'll talk about other offseason changes more specifically to Syracuse in future podcasts here. But coming up, we'll talk about the recruiting impact of the James Franklin firing. So stick with us here on this Locked On crossover edition of Locked On Syracuse and Locked On Nittany Lions. College football is back, and I couldn't be more excited. The tailgates, the rivalries, the energy in the stands, there's just nothing like it. But let's be real for a moment, okay? This is for Syracuse fans, for Penn State fans. Actually getting the tickets can feel like more of a battle than the game itself. Endless queues, hidden fees. The price is just all of a sudden jumping at the checkout, right? You see a price and you're like, oh, that's a good deal. And all of a sudden, it's much more money when you get to checkout. I think that's happened to every single one of us when purchasing tickets. And that's why I use Game Time, the app that gives the advantage back to fans. It's the easiest way to store last-minute tickets at the best prices with no surprise fees. What you see is what you're going to pay. So take the guesswork out of buying college football tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, that's promo code LOCKEDONCollege, LOCKEDONCOLLEGE for $20 off. Swipe, tap, ticket, go. Download Game Time today. So we've already hit on, Zach, of how Fran Brown is how should we put this, a remote possibility to be the head coach over at Penn State in 2026. It's not impossible, but it's more of a long shot considering
it's not likely. It's not likely. It's really not. But I will say this, Fran Brown and his staff are going to benefit from this because he will get a call. He's going to get a call because Penn State, again, no stone is being left unturned here. Which means if Fran Brown gets that call, he's going to go to Syracuse and the powers that be and say, Penn State's interested in me as a head coach. You don't want to lose me, right?
Yeah.
And then everybody, James Franklin used to do that too. Okay. That's not a criticism. It's an objective fact. When James Franklin got interest from Florida, LSU, USC primarily, all of a sudden you would see a raise or some more guarantees for the staff or some extracurriculars like amenities, the plans there being put together. So everybody's going to benefit here. Penn State's going to get its desired head coach. Fran Brown and his staff are going to get a little more certainty at Syracuse.
100%. And I don't blame Fran Brown or anybody from taking advantage of that. I mean, think about it. If anybody in their shoes, think about anyone in your current job right now. If someone else came to you and said, hey, we're interested and we're going to offer you this amount of money and it's more than what you're getting at your certain employer and it's doing relatively the same job, then even if you like your current employer and you want to stay there, you might go to your current employer and say, hey, give me a little bit more because this team is interested. And then everyone wins in that scenario. You get a raise, you keep your head coach, Syracuse, everyone's happy. Penn State gets their guy. But the recruiting angle of this is fascinating because we're already seeing Syracuse take advantage of this. Khalil Taylor is going to be on campus this weekend. We know they're also getting a visit from 5-star running back in 2027. Number 1 running back in the nation, previously committed to Penn State, Keemon Spell. Hard to believe, but you know what? Syracuse with Fran Brown, with their recruiting that they've shown over the past couple of years, not impossible. And now with Penn State, with their firing, a lot of players decommitting or leaving their options open now because they don't know what's going on with Penn State. So, Zach, how is Penn State working right now to keep as many recruits as possible in their recruiting classes?
I mean, I guess I should have mentioned Terry Smith as a possibility because he was the associate head coach, former Penn State letterman, played under Joe Paterno in the 90s. He was a wide receiver. Now he's the interim head coach. And I won't say that, he has just as much of a chance as a Matt Rhule, as a Manny Diaz, as a Mike Elko, as one of those first choices. That's tier 1. But Terry Smith is kind of quietly in tier 2 because here's what he has going for him. He has an opportunity to prove himself as the guy who can lead Penn State and at least be given an opportunity. He's been the associate head coach now for 5 years. He was on staff with James Franklin for the entire time, played 4 years for Penn State, like I said. The thing that stood out in his initial press conference was we are going to get back to just the fundamentals and being about Penn State University football. That is what Penn State is looking for in a head coach. I think James Franklin got away from that over the course of his career. What the reason was that his fault? Was that the fan base not backing him kind of thing, right? And always being, hesitant, stop and go with him. But it became more about what James Franklin is doing and what he's doing for the team and the program, and not about what is Penn State doing for you. So Terry Smith getting back to that, that's a fundamental of what Penn State, the university, is looking for in its head coach. And he's doing at least a good enough job at the moment to stop the bleeding. Okay. The class of 2026 in particular. Here's the thing though. And Pat Kraft, the athletic director, did say this. I'm not concerned about the 2027 class. Okay. I'm worried about the players that I have in this football building right now. It's no disrespect. I would love Keemon Spell to recommit to Penn State. Khalil Taylor, Gabe Jenkins, Leighton Von Brandt. Those were top 100 prospects nationally overall. Keemon Spell is obviously a top 10 player, but you have the transfer portal. A coach is going to get players that fit his system the best. Who even knows that I feel like Keemon Spell is almost, you can put him in any program and he's going to succeed. But at the end of the day, we truly don't know. So if it's not a perfect fit, I don't want to force prospects into a situation where they're not going to benefit as it is. So a new coach is going to bring in new players, new systems, that kind of thing. But Terry Smith is doing a good job to offset the immediate losses where guys they're not decommitting, not all of them. Penn State has about 25 commits in the class of 2026. 3 or 4 of them at the time of this recording have officially decommitted. The rest of them are still committed, but they have reopened their recruitment. I think that's what's interesting. The fact that 90% of the commits here in 2026 say we will explore other options because we don't know what's going on. But if Terry Smith happens to be the head coach, or we like the head coach that they bring in, they're going to stay committed, and Terry Smith is responsible for that right now.
I think you're 100% right about the priority has to be keeping the guys in the building that you want to keep.
Transfer portal.
In the building. Because Syracuse, maybe not on the same level of Penn State, obviously, but Fran Brown wasn't hired all that long ago. It was in, I think, December of 2023 or maybe late November of 2023. Either way, it was around that time frame, late November, December, when Fran Brown was hired by Syracuse. And you saw a lot of Syracuse players that were committed to Syracuse decommit from the program when Dino Babers was originally fired from the program and they didn't know who their head coach was. And so that happens. It happens to every program when there is a new coach. You're going to see some sort of impact with recruiting. In this case with Syracuse, of course, they could take advantage of the fact that there's some uncertainty with Penn State. The fact that Khalil Taylor is now on the open market. Keemon Spell is on the open market because they committed to James Franklin. They didn't necessarily commit to Penn State. And there's a big difference with that. And we saw that happen with Syracuse. And guess what? With Syracuse, they ended up doing just fine when they got Fran Brown because Fran Brown brought in his own players, and obviously they turned out a pretty good 2024 season and a very good recruiting class that year for Syracuse as well. So in the case of Penn State, yeah, they might lose Keemon Spell to another program. Khalil Taylor could commit to Syracuse. We don't know, but at the end of the day, if you're Penn State, it almost doesn't matter what Syracuse is doing. You have to focus on what you're doing and your next head coach, because your next head coach should be able to get his players that ultimately, like you said, can fit his systems.
And there's a lot of talented players at Penn State right now that you don't want to lose. Look, Penn State's already going to see a ton of roster turnover as it is. Drew Aller's out for the season, but you're losing your starting quarterback, 2 starting running backs, your entire starting offensive line, presumably. I think maybe 1 player could return there. You're losing 3 starters on the defensive line, and probably 2 or 3 guys in the secondary. So you want to make sure the players that were ready to take over and assume starting roles for James Franklin in a different timeline are going to stay, are going to be content because they're good. They're just waiting their turn patiently. And 2027, 2028, come on. Those guys aren't playing it down for Penn State at this point in time. What about the guys that are in the building that are better right now? That is why the transfer portal it's not the end all be all, but it is so much better for some of these programs because a school that is looking for a starting caliber wide receiver or just something better, a guy that's played 1, 2, 3 years of college football is much better than the only recruit is Keemon Spell that can come in and start right away or have playing time right away. Everybody else in the transfer portal, for the most part, is a better option for Power 4 programs.
And even in the case of Keemon Spell, he's in the class of 2027. So you're looking at 2 years until that guy is going to even have the possibility of taking a snap for you. And that's when he's a true freshman, when he's not going to be at his peak. He's not going to be at maybe his peak in college until he gets to 2028 when he's in his second full year. So if you're Penn State, okay, you lost Keemon Spell, you lost some great players in the class of 2027, and that stings. Like, it's okay. It stings. Those are good players. Those are good recruits, but you're Penn State. You should be able to recover. You're going to hire a head coach. He's going to get his own players that are ranked highly. And hey, if you get a coach from a top program, he might bring over some players from that program. I talked about it yesterday on Locked On Syracuse, how there was this, I talked about that possibility of Fran Brown being a tier 1 coach and how that could have, in an alternate universe, happened for Penn State. The appeal to it also was with Steve Angeli. If he was healthy, he would have had another year of eligibility for 2026. So if you were Penn State, you could hire Fran Brown, and Fran Brown can bring over Steve Angeli. Next thing you know, you also have your quarterback that's going to replace Drew Aller next season. So that's another thing that you have to consider if you're Penn State, not necessarily in the case of Fran Brown and Angeli, but when you're hiring your head coach, who can your head coach bring over that can offset the losses that you've had in recruiting so far? Who are some immediate impact players that they can get? But Zach, any last thoughts on this?
No, I think we've summed it up pretty well. We expect Fran Brown to stay at Syracuse. Penn State will be just fine. They're either going to meet that 10-2 threshold that, you're never going to even get back to 10-2 if you fire James Franklin. That's wrong. Whether it doesn't happen immediately, eventually it will happen. If it takes more than 3 years, if it takes a decade, Penn State, again, Oregon went through that where they didn't recover from Chip Kelly for quite some time and then said, I'm not trying to say that, Penn State is doomed, but I am here to say that it's going to happen. Penn State is a top 10 job and they're going to figure it out. And it's because there are figures in the building like a Pat Kraft, and there's the money there in this NIL transfer portal era to make things happen and get the quick fix. So Fran Brown, not a candidate today. Down the road for other Power 4 or other SEC and Big Ten jobs, absolutely. Big fan of Fran Brown.
I think so as well, and I think that this is a situation where every party can win. Syracuse can take advantage of the recruiting and the fact that a lot of players are leaving Penn State. Penn State can hire a new head coach that can get a lot of players to offset the losses. Fran Brown and his coaching staff can earn a little bit more money in their paycheck this coming year because Penn State's showing interest, as well as maybe other programs as well. So, and hey, Syracuse fans will be happy as well because Fran Brown is most likely going to stick around and have all of his great players stay with him. So, hey, Zach, I think this is overall a pretty happy podcast here. I think we summed it up that, hey, this is an optimistic way of looking at it. I think that this is a situation where everyone can win. And if you're Penn State, I don't think you have anything to lose because you're not coming off a national championship. You didn't win one with James Franklin. Ultimately, that's the ultimate goal, especially at a program like Penn State. They're one of those programs every year they want to compete for a national title. So even if it doesn't work out with your next head coach, you have to live with the idea that, you know what, it just didn't work with James Franklin. Even if he goes and succeeds somewhere else, it did not work. It was time for that relationship to end. Zach, thank you so much for joining me here on this Locked On crossover edition. I'm Jackson Holzer, the host of Locked On Syracuse. That's Zach Seyko, the host of Locked On Nittany Lions. Thank you all so much for watching. Thank you all so much for listening. And hey, if you like our respective podcasts, be sure to hit that like button. If you really enjoy our respective podcasts, be sure to hit subscribe. Tell all your friends about Locked On Syracuse and Locked On Nittany Lions. And we'll see you all again soon.